There are aspects of Russian history that few Westerners know about, but I think you should. It's a fabulous history of a country that is the largest one on this earth and has episodes that are truly intriguing, and we have few answers even today. And of course it somewhat touches upon the paranormal, and I think you'll find them interesting. The first one I want to talk to you is about the invisible city of Kitezh. And it was a famous Russian composer, Rimsky-Korsakov. He once wrote an opera called The Legend of the Invisible City of Kitezh. And Russia's well-known painter Vasnetsov actually created the scenery of it. They were inspired by one of the greatest Russian folk poems, The Legend of Kitezh, a city that was said to have vanished into Lake Svetloyar during the Mongol Tatar invasion led by Han Batu in 1238 AD. There may really be an ancient Russian city at the bottom of this lake, near the Volga River. This is one of the most mysterious places in Russia. Visitors to the Svetloyar Lake in the Nizhny Novgorod region of Russia can see 3 Orthodox crosses on the shore. An old legend states that the crosses were placed on the graves of warriors led by Prince Georgy, killed while defending the city of Kitezh against the Mongol invaders in the 13th century. When the Russian heroes perished, the city disappeared under the waters of the sacred Svetloyar Lake. For many Russians, Kitezh is a fabled place. Some believe that if one lights a candle, attaches it to a chip or a piece of bark, and puts it on the lake surface, one will hear the city's church bells chiming. Nuns from the nearby Makaryevsky convent claim that halfway from the lake to the convent, one can hear the convent's bells echoing those of Kitezh by putting one's ear to the ground. According to legend, of which there are many versions, the dwellers of Kitezh remain underwater today, living and worshipping as in the days before the Mongol invasion. The locals claim that when the weather is clear and calm, one can see the reflection of the town in the lake and hear the quiet ringing of the church bells. Each year, on the night of July 6, the Ivan Kupala holiday, Kitezh becomes visible according to local legends, and the church's bells can be heard too. Ivan Kupala, actually a mixture of the feast day of St. John the Baptist and the Slavic pagan holiday Kupala, is celebrated in Ukraine, Russia, and other former Soviet lands. There is a hypothesis that the lake was created by a meteorite's impact, but there may be another explanation. Some ancient legends state that the city actually vanished underground while the enemy watched. The deep lake appeared on the site later. This legend may be corroborated by scientific discoveries of the origins of the Svetloyar Lake. Russian scientists found that the lake was created in stages as a result of tectonic processes. The first one took place 1500 years ago. The second occurred 700 years ago, and the third one occurred about 350 years ago. It is probable that the ancient Russians witnessed this sudden descent of the lake. But where was there a city? Not long ago, divers were able to find at the bottom of the lake, it's about 25 meters down, fragments of a man-made palisade. No one really knows the meaning of the word Kitezh. To make matters more complicated, the area around the lake had for centuries been used by Russian religious dissidents, the old believers, or staroobryadцы, for their hideouts. They liked the idea of a city that would not bow down to the enemy. The old believers authored the Kitezh manuscript, but it was most likely dating back to the 18th century. Excuse me. I want to tell you about very interesting coincidences from the Russian history as well. You see, the history of Russia contains numerous mysterious episodes. Some can be described as nothing less than eerie or deadly coincidences. For example, Russian Tsar Vasily III had a childless first wife, Solomonia. In 1525, he forced his wife to become a nun and was soon married to Yelena Glinskaya. Before the new marriage, the Tsar asked blessings from the patriarchs of Constantinople, Alexandria, and Jerusalem. All three church leaders refused and stated the reason to the Tsar as follows: "If you dare to enter the unlawful marriage, then you will have a son who will amaze the world by his cruelty." Vasily III did not heed their warning and went ahead with the marriage. His older son from the second marriage succeeded him as Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, whose legacy is bloody and somewhat violent. The death of this bloody Russian Tsar was also predicted beforehand. Ivan died young. He was not even 60 years old. He died after having killed one of his sons in a senseless rage. He lost many close relatives and friends. Ivan the Terrible, a mass murderer, died alone in deep and bitter despair. But in the last year of his reign, Ivan ordered that 12 witches from the city of Arkhangelsk be brought to Moscow. Upon their forced arrival at the capital, the old women were placed under arrest. The Tsar's trusted servant, Boris Belsky, would visit the witches and inform his monarch about their conversations. One day, all of the witches at once declared that Ivan the Terrible would die on March 18. They paid the ultimate price for their false prediction, but the story did not end there. On March 18, the Tsar was actually in a merry mood before despair, not paying attention even to his bitter despair. He sat down to play chess, but then suddenly swayed and grabbed his chest. The tyrant, who centuries later was admired by another mass murderer, Joseph Stalin, died a few minutes later. And now I want to tell you about the so-called perpetuum mobile, and a very interesting person by the name of Ernst Elias Bessler, who lived between 1680 and 1745. He was also known as Johann Orphireus, and his secrets have not been able to be uncovered even until now. His inventions interested Peter the Great so much that the Russian emperor planned to travel to Western Europe in early 1725 to investigate them. But he suddenly died in January of that year. Excuse me. It is quite possible that the German inventor discovered a new source of power. He took his secrets to the grave without leaving behind any adequate explanation of the various self-moving wheels he constructed. Bessler had a good education, and he especially loved mechanics and clockmaking. The first perpetuum mobile device, or eternal engine, Bessler built in 1712. Apparently, the inventor was not happy with it and destroyed it. The next device was built 3 years later and was demonstrated in the town of Mercerburg. Important scientists of the time were invited to see it. Among this commission was the German physicist Christian Wolff, who had become the mentor of the famous Russian scientist Lomonosov. Although none of the invitees were allowed to see how the machine worked, they were fascinated by what they were actually allowed to see. The commission testified that the perpetual motion device rotated at the speed of 50 revolutions per minute and could raise a cargo to the height of 1.5 meters. So the Prince of Hessen-Kassel, Germany, learned of this device, and he invited Bessler to live in his castle. A special off-limits facility was prepared for the perpetual motion device. The prince observed the machine in motion and was astonished. He issued a document to the inventor that stated that the device was activated neither by any exterior force nor by a spring wound up beforehand. The device worked without interruption until something in its interior structure broke down. The prince was so impressed that he gave Bessler money and a house and made him a counselor. Other scientists were invited to observe the perpetual motion machine. The wheel was put in motion, and then the room containing it was sealed off by Prince's personal seal. 2 weeks later, when it was unsealed, the wheel was rotating at the same speed. The room was sealed again, this time for 40 days. After opening the room, the scientists observed the same rotating wheel. The third time, Bessler's device was sealed off for 2 months, and it was still working when the doors were opened. The speed of Bessler's wheel, according to one architect who was present, was quite impressive. If a man tried to stop the wheel suddenly, it would raise him into the air. News of the wonderful device reached St. Petersburg in 1721, and Peter the Great was very much intrigued. He ordered his trusted official Schumacher to learn more. But the emperor's servant was too late. Upon the arrival of the palace, he learned that the short-tempered Bessler, angry that the curious scientists who wanted to search inside the wheel and were allowed to do so by the prince, had taken his device apart. Bessler did not have an easy time after that. Because of persistent, unsubstantiated stories, rumors, and suspicions about his invention circulated throughout Europe. According to them, Bessler's trusted servant and his brother put the wheel in motion using various surreptitious means. Well, very few people today believe that the perpetual motion machines are anything but a fraud. But in 1998, the Russian scientist Professor Lev Sapogin, PhD of Technical Sciences, published an article titled Perpetual Problem in a Moscow magazine. He asserted that a perpetual motion machine is possible, but only within quantum mechanics, the study of matter and radiation at an atomic level. No such perpetual motion machine could work in the world of classical mechanics, as described by Isaac Newton. Incidentally, Newton was informed of Bessler's invention by a German scientist who had observed the wonderful wheel in motion, but no reply was ever received. Bessler took his secrets with him, and we do not know what moved his perpetual motion machine. It is also quite possible that Peter the Great's spies brought enough substantial information to St. Petersburg to justify a special trip by their emperor. But the greatest Tsar in Russian history died suddenly, and all we can do is guess what happened and what he knew. I thank you for your attention. If you can help my research, you can find the description of how to do so in Patreon. It's in the description for this video. Thank you, and I'll bring more videos soon.